water leak dispenser detector. Water leak detector. It finds water. We're unboxing water detector. It's very cool with the water label on it.
So for the Home Assistant users, I know you're probably wondering, well, why don't you just use ZHA? It's a built-in integration that is right into Home Assistant. There's no external stuff or whatever, right? Well, that's one of the beauties of Zigbee2MQTT is it's not attached to Home Assistant. So if the developers need to roll out some quick little upgrade or update to it, they don't have to wait on the upgrade schedule of Home Assistant. They can just roll it out because it's decoupled from Home Assistant itself. And other users that don't even use Home Assistant can use Zigbee2MQTT as well. So the work that the developers put into ZHA shouldn't be downplayed, but for me, I do like to have my Zigbee network decoupled from Home Assistant, and that way if I just want to use it with Node-RED and go straight to MQTT, or if I just want to have a Tasmodo switch, hey, do a long press and turn on a Zigbee Lite without having to go through all the pieces and parts of Home Assistant and just publish to MQTT, well, guess what? I can do that. So there are a couple other things. There's the OTA upgrades that you can do, firmware upgrades to like some of the IKEA devices, the Gillette Opto stuff, and there's several others out there as well. Then not to mention the buttons. So one thing I always saw was, hey, I paired up this button in ZHA, but now I don't see how we get the button presses. I just see the battery. Then you had to go do those ZHA events, and yeah, that can get confusing for some. Well, Zigbee2MQTT makes it very simple to do. It just puts it as an entity, and you can grab that state as it changes back and forth. And yes, that does stand true for devices that let you do double press and long presses or holds or whatever you want to call them, etc. It works great, and it makes it really easy to grab it with whatever type of automation you're using. And for device compatibility, I'm going to have to give the nod to Zigbee2MQTT. Find it does have a little higher percentage of devices that don't have any issues or oddness or whatever it might be. And it's pretty easy for even someone like yourself to add a new device to Zigbee2MQTT. Then you combine that with all the different configuration stuff you can do from logs and whatever, just find it a little bit easier. But hey, if you want to try out ZHA, go right on ahead. It's right there in Home Assistant. A lot of these devices and coordinators is all going to apply for ZHA, including some of the setup and stuff you're going to learn. Go ahead and try out both and see what best fits your needs, because there's not really a best. It's the best of what is the best for you. So remember we talked about the frequency or the spectrum that's used for Zigbee, and it is used in the 2.4 gigahertz, which is a good and a bad thing. The good thing is, think about it, that if pretty much all the Wi-Fi devices out there are manufactured and you can use them all over the world. There are some different rules with power and a couple of different channels, but for the most part, you can use all the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi devices pretty much worldwide. Well, same goes with Zigbee. Say if you're a manufacturer of, say, a temperature sensor that's going to measure temperature and humidity and runs off of a little coin cell battery. Well, those coin cell batteries, you're pretty much going to see them worldwide. You can make one little temperature sensor and you can do it just for every single country. You're not having to make a different temperature sensor that's Z-Wave and then have to go to all the different Z-Wave bands, in which that of course raises the cost some. But the downside is going to be it does share the space with Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi is the one that's going to mess with Zigbee, not Zigbee's going to mess with your Wi-Fi, so don't worry about that. The protocol that Zigbee uses is a lot slower than you would need or use on Wi-Fi because you're not streaming Netflix to your light switches, unlike some of the subreddits want to think with Wi-Fi light switches that supposedly watch Netflix all day somehow. But that's another topic. We're talking about Zigbee. So be careful on your channels of what you choose. And thanks to MetaGeek, they did a pretty good graphic here. And so definitely go hang out their site, patronize it, do it all the things, do what you got to do, and thank them for their website and their great graphics work. We'll leave the link down there. And you'll see typically in your router or access points you have, there's like 11 channels for most countries. Some countries have a little less, some have a little more. But we're going to just talk about 1, 6, and 11. And those channels are non-overlapping. So you always hear that say, hey, I want to pick, channel 1 for this access point. In the back of the house, I want channel 6, and that way they don't overlap. Yeah, and I know if you live in a condo apartment area and you've got a bunch of neighbors, it can be an issue as well. So you just got to find the one that just doesn't have as much noise going on. Down in the channel numbers, and the channel numbers can be confusing somewhat. We'll see if we can zoom this graphic in. So you'll notice that channel 11, which a lot of Zigbee networks say come default to, it's going to be right there in the main spot of channel 1, which, well, that might be fine. So if you just use 6 and 11, then you're probably not going to worry about, and you can be fine with channel 11. But maybe you're a little better off if you choose channel 26. You can see it's kind of on the back side of channel 11. So then even if you had someone or a neighbor or whatnot using channel 11, you would have a better signal to noise ratio or experience with your Zigbee network. So find you a channel and do make sure that you pick that channel at the beginning of your network, because if you change the channel in the middle of after you paired all your stuff, you're going to have to go through and repair all your different devices and sensors to get them to see that new channel. So it's not a big, huge issue. It's just something that if you make that decision and find that right channel at the beginning, it makes things a much better experience with Zigbee. And one last thing before we jump out in the channels, if you're going to be looking at some devices, go take a look at those device pages, because there's some particular list of devices that only support certain channels, unfortunately. So you wouldn't want to pick a channel that your device you're trying to pair does not support. So in the install portion of Zigbee2MQTT, I am going to show the Unraid install first, and we're going to use the USB device. I will show one with the HassOS, and that way with people that are running supervisor can do the install with that way as well. And I'll show some of the limitations that you may run into. And we'll probably do that one with the tubes one. That way we don't have to do any pass-through stuff of the Zigbee coordinator. So definitely stick around. You'll see both, because that way you can apply some of these stuff based on what type of device that you chose. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in the USB to our box. So I'll jump into the apps and go install Zigbee2MQTT, and we'll go ahead and click install. And there are a couple things. I did bring this template into Unraid to make things a little easier. And of course, I'm probably going to butcher his name. It does point to Konik's actual official container. If you do want to run the development version, just to kind of put you more on that bleeding edge, you can just come in here and change it and use the tag. I did provide it here for you. You can just put the latest -dev on the end of it. But we're just going to use regular production. So you can leave all the defaults here. There is some information if you want to read it about doing the GUI. And you will need to put that in the configuration, which we'll do. But you can accept all the defaults here, and you'll notice there's no USB pass-through yet. But just go ahead and hit apply. Should get the command finished successfully, and you may be tempted to come back over to Docker and you'll notice it's stopped. You may be tempted to, well, let's hit start, right? Well, what's going to happen, it's actually going to crash again because you don't have your configuration set up properly. So if you take a look at the logs, you'll notice there's a bunch of information that can't start up, Zigbee herdsman, etc. It's crashed because it can't see the Zigbee stick here. And well, we need to go fix all of that. So what I like to use to edit some of the files actually on Unraid, I'll use WinSCP. You're more than welcome to go dig on through and use Samba, or you can use the command line and V or whatever you want to use to go edit your files. So once we get into the folder, we're going to go into Mount. We'll go to User. We'll go to App Data. And you may have to hit refresh if you've already pulled this. And there should be the folder of Zigbee2MQTT. And then you'll notice there's the log and there's the configuration YAML file. We'll go ahead and hit edit on it. And it's already filled out some stuff for you. So the first thing I do want to do, you'll notice, hey, that there's going to be the Home Assistant false integration. We'll go ahead and change that to true. You can set that in the GUI as well. And that's going to do that auto discovery. That way you don't have to do any YAML code when you add your devices. I don't want my new devices to allow to join just yet. And you can do all this in the GUI once the GUI is started, but you got to get the GUI started. So the MQTT, I'm going to set that to the IP address of my current little server. And I do have an user ID. Now down to these serial settings. It's not going to be using this ACM0. So how do you go find your own device, right? Let's head on over to the Zigbee2MQTT docs. And I like to do a lot of copying and pasting. So look under the Run Zigbee MQTT. And this is going to vary per device. I'm using that USB. It's that CC2652P2 device. That'll be very similar to most of those. And you need to determine the location. And I'm just going to take and copy this command here. And if you go back to the Unraid GUI, there you can hit the little terminal prompt. And we'll paste in our command. And you'll notice there we are. This USB 1A6 USB serial IF port. So what I like to do is I'll take their example here and again, copy and paste. I'll copy everything up to the slash here right after the byte ID. If you want to type it, hey, go right ahead. And I'll go ahead and paste that over the port here. The next part is going to have that USB dash da 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 da. It's going to be based on your device. So copy that again to the clipboard and we'll paste that in. And that should be our path. Now there's a couple other settings we talked about the front end. I want to go enable that. In the documentation, if you look down here, it says information front end. And it's highly suggested to do the front end. It's very cool. I'm just going to copy and paste this code straight out of the documentation and paste it into ours. I don't need the comments. I don't need this host information. And I'm not using SSL because I'm keeping it all local. And the port, you can leave it 8080, but I have other stuff and I'm using 9442. And that's what's set up in that Docker container template, but you're more than welcome to change it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this whole port to my clipboard because I need to edit my Docker container to pass that USB device into that Docker container. So I've saved it. And then we'll come back and go to Zigbee2MQTT. If it does show started, just hit refresh and you'll notice it's going to say stopped. So hit edit and come down here and you're going to say add port variable, label, device, etc. We're going to add a device. The name, you can give it whatever name you want. We'll just call it Zigbee Stick or something like that. It's up to you. And then the value is going to be what you had in that clipboard because you put that in for the configuration YAML file. So we'll save that. And if everything goes right, you'll hit apply. So we'll show successful. Now, one other piece that I do need to put in there, we did talk about the channels. And so a lot of times I'll come into the documentation, and if I just want one piece, I like to put this in here before I do start up my Zigbee network. I'll go to configuration. It has the entire configuration down here. So if there's any options you're curious of, how does it go in here? And this is where one part is going to make a difference if you're running supervisor on how to set this up. Is if you're doing it this way and you're doing your own Docker thing, you can put the generate. You can't do the generate on supervisor. You just really got to make up your own. So I'll just go ahead and copy in this section here, and because I do want to change to channel 26. So on the pan ID, we'll go ahead and put generate in there. The reason why I do my own key is you want to secure your own Zigbee network. You don't want to use the default key. It comes with one, but don't use it. If you don't want to use your own generated random one, just make up some stuff. Or if you don't run supervisor, you can just put generate, start the container, and it will make a random key for you. Don't share it with anybody, and don't share it on your live streams either. And now, one thing to note about the channels, again, this will be based on the devices, because if they are using the Zigbee, I think it's called Light Link, the ZLL, you would need to make sure and choose a channel that's in this list. So if we did pick 26, that would give us an issue. We can use 25, but we'll be the rebel and use 26, and we'll see what happens, right? And we'll save it, and we'll go give a start to the Docker container and see what happens. There's the GUI of Zigbee2MQTT, and pretty much at this point you probably won't have to go digging off in the YAML file again. Now, I do like that they did this feature here, because it definitely helps out, especially I don't get blinded doing videos, and it just looks great. You'll find a lot of different settings in here. I'm not going to go through them all. We may do some other advanced video. If you want to look at one like that and you want some little different features and stuff talked about, definitely leave a comment down below. But if you go through some of the settings, you'll see there's that Home Assistant integration. There's your MQTT settings. You can even go into the experimental section. Because we do have a CC2652, we can change the power. And sometimes more is not better on power on the Zigbee network. And that's probably one of the things we'll talk about in a future video. So there's the dashboard there, and you can see we do not have any devices, but it's configured, ready to go. And we're going to do the install of the one in HassOS, and then, so you may want to skip over that if you don't want to watch that. Use the chapters down below, and we'll jump to the part where we do the pairing, and don't forget to watch the closing, right? So for the HassOS installation, we're going to show you how to use the add-on with Zigbee2MQTT. Do make sure you do upgrade to the latest version of Hass before you go use this. You never know what kind of fixes may be in there. So we'll jump on to the add-on store, and I know you may be tempted. Let's just put in Zigbee, right? So you will need to go into the Zigbee2MQTT documentation and go add a URL for the add-on store. So if you scroll on down, you'll see running Zigbee2MQTT on the Home Assistant official add-on. Just go follow the instructions right through here. It could change, could make it easier. Repositories, we will add this one, just like the instructions show. And there we are, we got Zigbee2MQTT. We'll add this one here, and we'll go ahead and hit install. While that's installing, we're gonna go ahead and plug in the tubes Ethernet Zigbee coordinator and get it attached to power. All right, so we got this guy plugged up on the network. Let's go look for his GitHub page. We'll scroll through. We want to get it up and running. We're not going to be using ZHA. Here we are, Zigbee2MQTT. And there's the serial port. So let's give that a try if we can just go to this address. So I wasn't able to find the .local address. I haven't had much luck that working, I guess due to the different VLANs and stuff. I was able to go in and go find the IP address to this guy. And in the configuration, here's all the configuration for you. And we did talk about in the last section, if you did skip it, currently as the recording, you cannot put in generate in here. It will give you an error. That's just the one issues of running supervisor. It's kind of like, you know, when a bunch of kids running, you know, stock in a grocery store, you got that supervisor kind of keep them in line. But once you get a little older and you probably don't need as much supervision and you can actually handle having that beer around quitting time. Well, that's kind of what the things are with supervisor. Get rid of that supervisor and you can really do what you want. Be your own boss. But till then, if you want to run this guy, go in here and do make up your own network key. Just however you want to do it. It's going to make a difference. Don't use this default one, please. Again, we're going to use the channel 26. And for the port, we'll copy exactly what he's showing here. And we'll paste it into here. But again, the local address is not working. I'll put in my IP address. Probably a good idea if you don't have it working to also use a reserved static IP on this device. And we'll leave everything else the same. I don't want the permit join. We'll get to that later. We'll hit save. And we'll go to the add-on store and we'll add MQTT. And we'll start MQTT. Let's make sure MQTT starts. It should use the IDs there. Let's see if this guy starts. Give it a little bit and then we'll jump in and see if we can get to the GUI of Zigbee2MQTT on supervisor. And there we go. So it's a window in a window thing, and I guess if you like that, if it doesn't pull up the GUI, I find sometimes if you open the web UI, just hit the F5 and refresh the page, and a lot of times it will pull up. So we'll add this one to the sidebar, and that way we can jump in and add our things. So some of the same exact stuff that we showed in the previous one. Now, one question I don't know is if you save stuff in here, does that somehow get pushed back to your add-on configuration? And yeah, see, that's just one of the confusing things I find with running supervisor. So now that we got it installed, we got both of them installed, whichever way you want to do it. But now it's time for the fun part of really just taking something out the box and pairing it, calling it a day. Watch it pop up. Let's check it out. So once you get Zigbee2MQTT set up, you want to install something, you want to add it to your list, it's really simple to do. For the most part, you just really take it out the box, plug it in, pair it, and you're off to the races. Watch, it's this simple. So we'll go ahead and we'll plug this. It's one of the Linkind little smart plugs, and yes, this one should come up as a router. So we'll go ahead and plug it in. Now, if you don't know the procedure for doing the pairing process, again, if you do go to the Zigbee2MQTT devices page, and no, not some other janky website, supported devices, and if you go down and find your device, and a lot of times they will talk about the pairing or some weirdness or whatever information of your device. It's a big, massive list. It's pretty cool. So on this one, I think it's just hold down the button and it does the reset. But by default, you'll notice I have permit join all is the button that can be picked. That means it's actually not. It's kind of backwards. So it's not in this mode. Basically, when you push that button, then it goes into that mode. So we'll go ahead and allow devices to join our network. Now, you don't want to leave them and leave it open all the time. You'll notice this version does the little countdown timer, so your neighbor's not accidentally adding devices to your network. So I'll go ahead and hold down this button and we'll get it into reset. And we got the light blinking on it. You might be able to see it on the camera. And we'll go ahead and give it a little bit, and you should see it does a type of interview, and it should pop up down below and should join up on the network. You can see the light has changed colors, and there you are, device joined. It's going to start the interview. Just give it a second. Be patient. Doesn't take that long. I may talk a lot, but it definitely does not take as long as I take to make you watch a video. So you'll notice you get all these codes and stuff. Yeah, they got these IEE addresses, a friendly name that's not so friendly. Change it. Change it from the get-go. Hit the little pencil right here. And you do want to update the Home Assistant entity. Nobody wants to use these crazy Mac IDs or whatever it may be in Home Assistant. That would suck. So we'll just go, let's just say this is going to be Linkind. We'll hit save. And makes it a little easier, and a lot of times you actually get the little icon, the picture. That's cool. You get the manufacturer, the model number. You get the LQI, which is the link quality index. It'll show you, hey, it's a power, it's mains power. You can hit reconfigure, you can hit delete. And hey, if you're done, hit the button disable join. That way you're not going to have something else join up your network you didn't want to. All these are cool little links. It'll jump into, look, straight to Linkind. Pretty cool stuff. Jump into the model, exact model number, which I just talked about of, hey, what weirdness do you have with it? If you want to do the manual thing, you can. It's all up to you. And if you do click on the device here, it will give you configuration options per device. And then the very cool part, right here, router, device type, which means, remember the intro, or if you did skip it, it's going to route traffic kind of like a repeater. So that's a good thing. Most of your mains power devices will come up like that. Now, if you can go to exposes, and it doesn't know whether it's on or off because it just hasn't talked to it in that case yet, you can hit the little refresh. It'll show it's off. If you want to turn it on and off, and I can hear it, I don't know if you can on the mic, it's clicking the relay on and off. It's that simple to add something. And watch, let's go jump into Home Assistant. And if you look at the integrations, we can see we have in MQTT, there's one device. Linkind plug 1. There it is. You can turn it on and off. We can hit add to Lovelace. We'll just have it use that card, add to Lovelace UI, and boom, there we have our Linkind plug straight in Home Assistant itself. And if you do notice, you can actually come in here and go to automations, and you could build an automation with a trigger of, say, when something turns the plug on and off and toggles, etc., right there, and build in your Home Assistant automations if you want. So for battery powered devices, pretty much the same thing. A lot of times they may have like a battery tab or something in them, and we'll just simply pull that out. Sometimes it will go straight into pairing mode at that point. But if not, and we will need to turn on permit join, and let's see if they gave us a little tool to push the little button. A lot of times there is a little hole on some of these where you can just hold it down for so many seconds, and you use the little like SIM card tool type deal, and it will just start blinking an LED. This one's a little Moe's branded temperature sensor, and we'll see if it does pop up on, there we go, starting interview. And if the interview fails for some reason, or the timer's getting too close, just try it again. I know sometimes some of the Aquarius sensors, they're kind of a pain in the ass, but just keep trying at them. And some of the battery sensors, especially Aquaria again, they use some little weird, quirky protocol of Zigbee, but Zigbee2MQTT supports it. Is sometimes you may have to hit the button like every second or two because they'll try to go to sleep during the interview. Yeah, they're just lazy for some reason, but we still hire them, right? It's hard getting help these days. So here we are. This one's actually a Moe's one, but it's a rebranded Tuya one. And yes, we will update the Home Assistant entity. And you'll notice this one actually shows the battery power. And if we click on the sensor, you can actually see the battery is 100%. It's just going to be an in device, meaning it's not going to route traffic because it is sleeping. And you can see here we have our humidity, temperature, battery, and our link quality. And jump on back to Home Assistant. Yes, it's this difficult. Look at that. Didn't even edit the video. I was just a seamless jump over. There it is, Moe's temp sensor. And sometimes, just like that, you may not have the temperature and the humidity just yet, but along the next update, it will update its information. Sometimes there's a button on it. push it one time and not have to wait for the update. You'll just wake it up basically. Let's see if this will do that. We're not going to hold it down. We're going to push it once. And boom, there it is. No, we're not doing any songs. There we have the temperature and everything straight into Home Assistant. Add the Lovelace. We'll just use the regular card. You can do your own thing. Of course, then there you go. Humidity and temperature. And you'll notice there are some other attributes. You get the voltage and all this good stuff, and it's going to vary based on your device. So you'll just go down the line and keep adding things in. You'll notice if you do forget to turn off, it will go back to not allow anything to add to your network. One last thing I do want to show, the map. It's pretty cool with the map. Now, I wouldn't get hung up on the map too much because the routing can change, and some devices just choose to go a different path, and you may think that is the correct path. Now, it may take some time, but of course we just have a couple sensors, and you can see there's the coordinator, and there's the Lenkind plug, and there's the Mohs temp sensor. Now we'll take a look at a little different map of a little network that I have, and you'll see really the thing of having more of your routers out there, because it's going to give things more of a path to talk back to the coordinator. So of course the star is the coordinator, you know, the hub, the thing, the little radio, whatever it may be. And then you can click on these and move them around if you kind of want to. Yeah, that makes this like pentagram looking thing sometimes. No, I don't think that's intentional. But you can see I have a plug here. I've got a temperature sensor, 2 temperature sensors hanging off of it. They actually are closer to that router. And you can see there's some read sensors, and yeah, they actually are closer to that floodlight out there. And I do have a little Zigbee battery thing on my doorbell for notifications as well. And the rest of the stuff is all going to be mains powered, like light bulbs and plugs and stuff. And you can see how it will transfer messages back and forth, however something it sees fit. And it has multiple paths. And this is what I'm talking about, that healthy mesh per se. So once you go ahead and add more stuff, you may have this big massive looking thing, and it's pretty cool to come in here and look at, but I wouldn't get too hung up on some of the ways it does things. Is it all about, is it working? That's the key. So I hope you're able to learn something and set up your own Zigbee network if you may already have one set up, and maybe you learned a few extra little parts and pieces of things, and hey, maybe you never saw Zigbee2MQTT and you never were scared to try it. So there are some other topics we would want to talk about, say is whether you should use an antenna or not an antenna, or cases where more power makes more sense, or maybe less power actually makes more sense on some of the chipsets that you can adjust the power up and down from the default, like if this one was 5. So as always, some of the devices and stuff and favorites that we like and talk about in Discord and everything, we'll leave all those links down below. And I do appreciate it, as they are affiliate links, and there's no additional cost to you if you use them. So if I missed anything, or if you want to hear something else or some other subject on Zigbee or whatever it may be, or you just want to say, hey, shoot us a comment down below, a like, dislike, whatever it may be. And hey, I do appreciate all the Patreon subscribers. Definitely helps bring new projects and everything to the channel all the time. Yep, that's all for this one. I know y'all watch all my stuff, and y'all take care.